Hello there, my very good friends. Andy here for What Culture Wrestling with a list of one of the surest things to pop a massive crowd in all of pro wrestling: the finisher counter. These things are a nice antidote, really, to the slew of finisher kickouts that we see in this modern era of wrestling. It's an alternative way of generating drama that, when done precisely and at just the right point in a match to get the desired pop, well, it's pretty much the equivalent of lighting a match and throwing it into a barrel of oil. And today we're going to run through some of the very best ones from all of WWE history, but before you ask, no, unfortunately, we cannot show you footage. So with that in mind, I'm Andy from What Culture, and here are the 10 best ever counters to WWE finishers. Number 10, Edge spears Styles out of the sky, WrestleMania 38. The one really cool moment from a match that, being polite, didn't quite live up to astronomical expectations came when Edge saw AJ Styles was about to shoot through the sky with his phenomenal forearm and decided, hey pal, I'm gonna spear you clean out of the air. And indeed, out of your boots. It always helps in situations like this where the person jumping into the move isn't just jumping into the move. You know what I'm talking about. How many times throughout history have we seen someone just conveniently jump off the top rope or springboard into the ring doing absolutely nothing, just like they're a willing participant in all of this. That's the kind of thing that really shatters your immersion. It makes you think, oh yeah, this whole deal is really coordinated and fake and lame. But when you do it like this, when you have a reason to jump in, AJ has the phenomenal forearm. Obviously, he's gonna springboard in for that a lot of the time. That's what he was attempting. Edge countered it. It wasn't just a man jumping into the spear, it was an attempted move into the spear. And I'm always going to appreciate stuff like that because, let me tell you, I've had enough of these pesky wrestlers just jumping into nothing. This was great. Anyway, what am I saying? Number 9, Mr. Perfect escapes the stink face from the 7th of March 2002 episode of Heat. How do you stop a gigantic ass from entering your face and putting your lights out with its flesh and smells and fluids? Well, you could do a lot worse than what Kurt Hennig did here, wrestling Rikishi on an episode of Heat. He took his signature towel and he placed it conveniently at the last second between his face and Rikishi's kicks. A genius way to counter a pretty gross move, but an effective one throughout Rikishi's career. And although this didn't lead directly to Perfect winning the match, it did give us the all-time visual of Rikishi walking away from the corner with the towel shoved up his ass. Just tremendous stuff across the board. And yes, I know strictly the stink face wasn't a finisher, it was the banzai drop, but how can you omit something like this? I mean, look at that towel. It's right up there. Number 8, a most disastrous kick from the 20th of January 2014 episode of Raw. Cody Rhodes has recently returned to WWE, and of course the Roman Reigns match has been rumored heavily. Cody wants to go for a world title. Roman holds the only world title in the form of the Universal Undisputed Intergalactic Supercalifragil, whatever we're calling Roman Reigns' top prize. He's the guy. Cody's gunning for him, and when that match happens, you have to imagine that Cody is going to want it to go a lot better than this. There's a point in this match, Cody ducks a clothesline, he hits the ropes, he's going to springboard back with the disaster kick, but instead of hitting it, he gets Superman punched to his death. And death is exactly how he sold this thing. Cody crumpled like a Foosty biscuit. It's an absolutely tremendous spot, and that's why it's on the list. Number 7, Eddie rolls through the rock bottom from the 22nd of July 2002 episode of Raw. At the peak of his powers, Eddie Guerrero was almost impossibly smooth, and it's really highlighted when you go back and you look at spots like this one here. He counters the rock bottom so fluidly that it almost looks like it's a video game move. Rock hoists him up, Eddie pulls him to the mat somehow. When they get there, after seizing the arm, Eddie presses his back against Rock's chest and gets him down for a pinfall. Now this was only a near fall, it didn't end the match in Eddie's favour, but maybe it should have. I mean, if you're gonna close a match on the coolest spot, hard to do better than this. Just sensational, fluid, seamless technical wrestling from one of the best to ever do it. Number 6, a tombstone from a moonsault at WrestleMania 25. The WrestleMania 25 match between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker is understandably held up as one of the greatest in WWE history, outdone only, perhaps, depending on who you ask, by the match they had the following year. But this one had just one of my favourite and one of the best, I think, finisher counters in WWE history. And again, it's not strictly a finishing move for Shawn Michaels, particularly in this era of his work, but when he goes to the top rope looking for a moonsault, it's because he's desperate. It's because he's running out of ideas on how he can put the dead man away. So he's clearly going to the top rope for the moonsault with ending the match in mind. Doesn't come off for him. However, he goes for the moonsault, he lands in a tombstone, and he gets spiked. It's just great dramatic stuff from two of the best wrestlers in WWE history, two of the most important wrestlers in WrestleMania history. It's a classic. Number 5, the counter that killed the streak. This one is a little bit different compared to some of the counters on this list, which are just really visually appealing, really smooth, really crisp, just everything is tied together so perfectly, and they look perfect. That's just absolutely the right word for it. This, not so much. This was kind of messy. It was kind of all over the place, but that's professional wrestling in a nutshell. Not everything should be this super coordinated, super smooth exchange. You're supposed to be buying into the idea that what you're watching is a fight, a very elaborate fight with moves and Irish whips and stuff, but a fight nonetheless. So when you have a counter like this, as Brock engineers an F5 from an attempted tombstone from The Undertaker, it really enhances that feeling. Brock has to struggle. He has to work to get the dead man in place, and to me, that is just tremendous stuff. The guys are exhausted. They have emptied the tank on each other. They are believably not going to be able to perform at full capacity. So this little moment of wavering, this little sense of struggle really took this over the top, and say what you will about the result of this match, but for me, this was just really awesome. Number 4, Eddie Guerrero's F5 escape, in which Latino Heat scores one of the biggest, probably the biggest actually, win of his WWE career over Brock Lesnar at No Way Out 2004. He's up for the F5. You've seen this spot before. The World Heavyweight Championship is on the mat. All looks to be doomed for Eddie until he reverses into a swinging tornado DDT thing onto the belt, hits the top rope, frog splash, 1, 2, 3, boom, 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 job done. Now, my favourite thing about this is not just the counter itself, but Taz's call. He is incredulous that Eddie Guerrero has cheated to gain this advantage over Brock Lesnar. And what makes that so great is that, yeah, he did cheat, but that was Eddie Guerrero. This spot really sums up just the charm and the appeal and the charisma and the cunning of the man. He knew that he was overmatched against Brock. He knew that he was going to have to play quite loose with his morals in the ring, which the character was always fond of doing. And he did just that. It fit him to a T. He had to take an extra step to fell this gigantic, terrifying, imposing monster. He did it, and it was one of the most cathartic wins in WWE premium live event, I guess, history. Number 3, Randy Orton plucks Evan Bourne right out of the sky from the 12th of July 2010 episode of Raw. This is another one of those counters where often guys coming off the top rope just jump into nothing. Here, the complete opposite. I mean, this was so perfectly timed that if it had been performed or even attempted by two people less skilled than Matt Sydal, as he's now known and was known before WWE, and Randy Orton, it might have ended really poorly and somebody maybe would have gotten hurt. But because these guys were so locked in and because these guys are such pros between the ropes, it was just sensational. Evan Bourne, you've seen the move. You've seen it before. I don't need to explain what a shooting star press is, but he comes off the top and just at the point where his body is straightening out and he's going to land it and he's going to beat Randy Orton and win the match, score one of the biggest wins of his career, Randy Orton's off the mat hitting him with an RKO. The RKO is perfect for situations like this. In fact, I could have populated this whole list from RKO counters if I really wanted to. But I picked this one for this particular spot at this high position on the list because, my goodness, it just doesn't get much better than this. But, I mean, it does get a little bit better. I've got 2 more things on this list. But that aside, this ruled. Number 2, Seth Rollins gets trapped. Money in the Bank 2019. I don't think many people would argue with Seth Rollins' Universal title run in 2019 after beating Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Maybe didn't live up to expectations. The babyface run didn't quite pan out, but he did have this awesome match with AJ Styles for the belt at Money in the Bank 2019, and it was one of the best of the year in WWE, taken over the top by the incredible kick out from this counter. Rollins was going for the stomp. Now, AJ had tried for the Styles Clash a couple of times already, but it didn't work. Seth had him scouted. That meant that if he was going to hit the Styles Clash and stand a chance of victory, he was going to have to be crafty and creative. That's exactly what he did here. As Seth goes up for the stomp, AJ goes up too, catches him on his shoulder, obviously puts him down, gets him in position for the Styles Clash, hits it, near fall, crowd goes mental, just tremendous stuff. Like, in terms of how it came together, in terms of the execution, perfect, looked really cool, looked really great, but also strategically, hadn't been able to hit the move twice before. Here's an advantageous situation that I'm so smart in the ring that I've been able to work to my benefit. Fantastic. Just a great match and a great spot. And at number 1, the ultimate RKO out of nowhere at WrestleMania 31. Strong chance that when you first clicked on this video and started making your way through the entries, you might have picked this as number 1. It is the greatest RKO counter ever, if you ask me. I think a lot of people would agree with that, and yeah, I mean, just go rewatch the clip. Look at how this comes together one more time. It is so perfect in its positioning, in its execution, in how it gets the crowd fired up, and the way it sets the tone for a fun night of action. It is, of course, Seth Rollins going for the stomp against Randy Orton, getting incredible air on the stomp, and then Randy pops up, Randy's in place, Randy hits the RKO, he does some stick stuff where he gets all fired up afterwards. It's an all-time crowd-popping moment in WWE history, and that is why this counter is number 1 on my list. The greatest finisher counter in WWE history, in my opinion. But what's your opinion? How about you let us know down in the comment section below, and click like and click subscribe and ring the bell, all those nice things that help us to create more content like this. Anyway, thanks for joining us today, guys. You can follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. You can follow me at Andy H. Murray. The H stands for, hey, where was my favorite counter? My friends, the answer is leave it in the comments. Goodbye.